Welcome back to The Courage to Speak with me, Leonie Mellinger, the podcast that asks, what does it take to have the courage to speak up and speak out in life? My guest today is Kathy Lette. Kathy has written 20 books, including 14 best-selling novels, the first of which was Puberty Blues, and the latest of which is Till Death or a Little Maiming Do Us Part. She is published in over 17 languages. Her books have been made into films, TV series, and an opera. She also works as a TV presenter and a travel writer. She has just completed a tour in Britain and Australia of her one-woman show, Girls' Night Out, and is pleased to report that she didn't fall out with the cast. Kathy has 3 honorary doctorates. She lives in Sydney and London, where she can often be found at the Savoy Hotel, drinking a cocktail that was named after her following her time as writer in residence there. She cites her career highlights as once teaching Stephen Fry a word, Salman Rushdie the limbo, and scripting Julian Assange's cameo in The Simpsons' 500th episode. She is an ambassador for Plan International, Their World, the National Autistic Society, and Ambitious About Autism. Kathy, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you on the subject of the courage to speak, because you are known for being
a loud mouth.
I was going to say outspoken. But yeah, okay. So what I'm interested
the mouth from the south.
Yeah. Were you always like this, or was little Kathy different?
Oh gosh. Well, I have 3 sisters, so I don't know how many siblings you have, Leonie. What do you have?
I actually have 5.
Oh my God. Well, then you know,
Yeah.
you speak up or you don't get heard.
Yes.
So it
yes.
was just a cacophony of.
And where
cackling.
did you come in the
Second?
Second, right.
So my older sister she was a police psychologist. She was the chief police psychologist for New South Wales. She was like cracker, solving forensic crimes.
Oh, my
really
goodness.
brave. She got medals for heroism and stuff. And then there was me, the black sheep. I'm now just a little bit beige sheep. And then my next sister down is in marketing. She works in nuclear medicine. And then my little sister's a naturopath. So we're very different, but very, very close.
Right.
And
your mum
would speak up for each other.
Pretty formidable too.
Yeah, and she was a teacher. I mean,
Right.
she's still 91. She's still alive, thank God.
Yeah.
But when she had when she worked, when I was a girl at school, she was the only mother who had a full-time job. Most of them
Really?
any other woman who worked was in the tuck shop.
Yes.
So she not only had a job but a vocation. She was a teacher and then a school principal.
Right.
So, and that was a great role model for her
exactly.
daughters. I mean, none of us would ever have changed our names when we got married, or we're all passionate feminists.
So how did your dad fit into all these women?
Well, my poor dad, his name was Mervyn. He died 10 years ago, sadly. But his name was Mervyn. He worked in optic fibre, so we called him Optic Merv. And he was a famous footballer in Australia. He was a front row forward for the Bulldogs. He was the fastest front row forward in Australian history at the time when he was a famous player. And he won a running race at the Sydney Cricket Ground with all the footballers, got £100 and then used that to put the down payment on a block of land. And then they built a little room that they lived in, Mum and Dad, that is now the garage.
Yes.
And my sister and I were only 13 months apart. We lived there as babies, and every time they made a bit of money, they built another room onto the. So the house is kind of this fabulous ramshackle construction of extra rooms being shoved on here and there. And he wanted 4 sons, obviously, so he could have his own little football team. But he got 4 daughters, but we all verbally scrum.
Right.
I think I can verbally tackle any man in the world and take him down.
And so
I think the gene
you
came
learned
through,
that early on. Oh, fantastic. Now, your books track every stage of your life. It's absolutely fascinating. Right. And I love the way that you always tell it like it is. And I wondered if sometimes is it easier to say things through your writing that you couldn't maybe say in any other way?
I think if I have any gift at all as a writer, it's putting in words what women are thinking, but not necessarily saying out
Absolutely,
loud.
yeah.
Because we're brought up to be so decorative and demure, etc.
Yes.
And also just writing down the way women talk when there's no men around.
Yes.
Because I think there's a big difference between male and female humour. I think my male friends are very funny.
Yeah.
But they have what I call the black belt and tongue foo. You know, they sort of tell set jokes.
Yes.
Which is their way of being friendly, but not intimate the way women are. Women never tell set jokes.
Yes.
Ever.
Absolutely.
Our humour is cathartic, confessional, very candid.
Yeah.
We strip off to our emotional underwear in about 3.6 seconds.
Yes.
And it's a psychological striptease that reveals all. And it's very, very funny.
Yes.
I mean, you have to be hospitalised from hilarity on a girls' night out. So, and I just try and capture that camaraderie on the page, because my whole raison d'etre is that women are each other's human wonder bras, you know, uplifting, supporting,
Yes.
and making each other look bigger and better.
But you're very good at that because you're so outspoken. I think you give people permission to do that too, and not everybody is like that. I think a lot of people don't come out with the stuff you come out with. So you read your books and you go, oh my God, I can't believe she's saying this. This is exactly what happens, but I've never told anybody.
Oh, that's so good.
You know, so I think it's brilliant.
But I'm sure that comes from having three sisters, because we tell each other everything.
Yeah.
And we can be so honest and open with each other.
Yes, I'm sure that helped, obviously.
And we speak up for each other. So, for example, if any of us is ever in any trouble, you know, the wagons circle.
Yeah.
And I've got that wonderful ballast in life that I know I've got that unspoken, unconditional love.
Yes.
From my mother too.
Yes.
So.
Some of the stuff that you deal with in Puberty Blues is very hard hitting about the experiences that teenagers have, and you clearly had, and I would go so far to say is it traumatic, you know, and I'm interested in the effect on you that had.
Looking back, I think the reason I always want to write things down, I like to write the book I wish I'd had when I was going through something. So it's almost like handing a manual down to the next group. And I think that need to educate and enlighten comes from the fact my mother's a teacher and I've got a teaching gene. But I've also got a weird kind of crazy comedy gene. So it comes through in my work that it's all my books are so strongly feminist, but they're funny. Because I think if you can disarm with charm,
absolutely,
you've got a much more likely chance of changing people than if you're hitting them over the head with your ideology. So Puberty Blues, which I'll just explain to people listening who might not know, in Australia, it's a cult book. I wrote it with a girlfriend, and we wrote it together when we were about 16 or 17, I think. And it was about the brutal sexual initiation that surfy girls go through in that very tribal culture when they're only 13. And it's a very raw book. And I left school at 16, mainly to escape these surfy boys. I always say, you know, the only examination I've ever passed is my cervical smear test. But I ran away to be a writer as well because I had already had so much I wanted to say. And Puberty Blues was written, I wrote it for all those other surfy girls, because you have no objectivity at that age about what you're going through.
But how did you manage not to censor yourself? Because so many writers find it really difficult to write about such personal stuff.
I was reading Hemingway at the time, actually, and I can see what I was reading because the book is so spare. There's not one extra adjective or adverb. It's like straight Vegemite or Marmite with no bread or butter. It's very astringent. And I think it's because I was reading him. I was educating myself through books and through reading and it was the perfect author to be reading when I was writing Puberty Blues, because the reason it's lasted so long and it resonates with every generation is it's so easy to read and it's so raw and it's so real. And I don't think there has been a book since Puberty Blues that has dealt with that terrible sort of brutality and sexism that young girls go through, especially in that surfy culture, with such honesty. And that's why it resonates and goes
Absolutely.
on. It was made into a film by Bruce Beresford, and then it was just made into a 20-hour TV series. And funnily enough, I thought the main viewers of that program would be people my age, kind of reminiscing about what it was like. Or maybe our parents going, oh my God, is that what they were doing? But the main demographic of viewers was teenagers, because it still spoke so honestly to them. So I think readers can smell verisimilitude in your work, and if there isn't that bit of authenticity, it's not going to strike that kind of creative chord that you hope that it will. So,
but there are many writers who can write stuff, but then they can't speak it. They just don't know how to talk at all. That's why they write. But you seem to be able to do both. How do you do that?
Oh my God, I am a bit of a chatter. I think it's my Celtic gene. I've got the Celtic gene back there. That they're never short of a word.
That's brilliant.
But the boys I grew up with were they disproved the theory of evolution. They were evolving into apes. They really were. And as proof of how sexist they were, they used to get us to cut their names out in paper, sticky tape them to our stomachs, and then sunbake so we get a tan tattoo in the shape of their name. So if ever I get cancer, I'll have this melanoma called Bruce.
Oh my God.
I'll have to have like a Brucectomy to get rid of it. And so when I talk about them, I try and do it. When I am talking about my books, I try and also find the funny.
Yes.
Because, as I said, if you can make them laugh, they'll be listening. And the men will listen too.
And you're very, very good at that. Have you faced any challenges or obstacles being an outspoken woman, either in Australia or in London? And is there a difference between how you operate in the two countries?
That, of course, any woman who puts her head above the parapet is going to get it, shot at, especially by men, because I'm blowing raspberries at the patriarchy all the time. And I will continue to comically kneecap men until we get equal pay. There isn't one country in the world that has gender parity, not one. So, we still have a lot to be angry about. But I don't feed the trolls. When I'm trolled, I don't feed them. I picture them. I see them living in their mother's basement, with their old tracksuit pants covered in cheesels and jism, And I think, would I talk to them in real life? No. So why would I waste time talking to them? It's not going to change them.
Is it different, though, in Australia as opposed to... Because I should think the Brits are a bit more uptight, aren't they? I don't know.
Well, they're just as sexist, the men, but it's much more... It's more hidden. It's more insidious. It's more subtle. So the good thing in Australia is that the battle lines are drawn and you can see the enemy.
Right.
They're right there in plain sight. And a lot of them still prove that, dinosaurs do still roam the earth. They are prehistoric. But in England, it's more, it's more hidden. And I prefer to be able to see the enemy I'm shooting at. Like here, for example, so many left-wing men belong to the Garrick Club. This is a club that bans women. I mean, if that was in Australia, we'd be there throwing flaming tampons through their windows. But here it's just kind of accepted that that's okay.
Yeah.
And the way Boris Johnson talked about how he would condescend to women and say, calm down, dear.
Yes.
Or give her a little pat on the bottom and send her on her way.
Yes.
I mean, that's just, to me, worse than the way those terrible misogynists treated Julia Gillard, because that was blatant.
Yes.
They weren't hiding.
Yeah.
Whereas here So,
and have you ever had to deal with backlash or negative feedback for expressing your opinions?
Oh, often, especially from blokes.
Yeah.
But I always say to women, we are more verbally dexterous than men. We use about 350 more words in our daily vocabulary than the average male.
Oh, really?
So it is a weapon we have. You can give a good tongue lashing. And whenever I go to schools and give talks to girls about, preparing for life, I always say to them, you are underdressed if you go out without a couple of really good one-liners tucked up your trouser leg. Because if some guy is trying to put you down, if you can take him out with a joke and make other people laugh at him, well, you've won. So, use their testicles as maracas.
Yeah, so you actually use comedy as a weapon sometimes.
Totally.
And so comedy enables you to say things that you couldn't say straight. Is that right?
Yes, because also you can also always say, I was being ironic.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
You clearly have an irony deficiency.
And you do that so well. I mean, that is a skill,
Well, I think growing up with those Aussie guys too, it was a real lesson. You had to sort of, men talk about having balls of steel, but women, my women friends have labia of titanium. And it's because, for example, my very first job interview in Australia for a TV show, I already had a novel out, I already had a column in the newspaper, so I wasn't green, but I was about 21, 22. I went for a job interview, And this is how it played out. 5 television executives, male, sitting in a semicircle like that.
Yeah.
They're all very well known. I won't name them, but you probably would have heard of some of them. So, and the top dog whacked a $10 note on the table and said, "I bet I can make your tits move without touching them." And I said, "Oh yeah, whatever, you know." He leant over, mauled my breasts and said, "Ha ha, you won, there's the $10. And all the men are laughing. So I immediately said, "I bet you $20 I can make your balls move without touching them." And I kicked him between the legs.
Did you?
I certainly did.
Oh my God.
I got the job. But, today you'd have a sexual harassment suit, but then we didn't have any protection. You just had to, every day you went to work, strap on a bulletproof bra and deal with those men. And I learnt to deal with them by giving them a bit of quiplash. And I think all women should be good at that. Irish women are good at it. They've also, when you go to Ireland, all my Irish female friends are really quick-witted in that same way. And it's a really good tool to have in your kit.
Yeah. And are things different, do you think, since the Me Too movement?
Well, isn't that a great example of people speaking up and speaking out?
Yeah.
And it started with one person and then immediately snowballed. And that's what I would say to anyone who's ever vacillating about whether they should speak out. You will find momentum. It just takes one voice. And all people want to know is that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And I think that in my books too. The only book I was really worried about was when I wrote Mad Cows, which took the idea that motherhood is the ultimate fulfillment for a female. I took that great big sacred cow and I whacked it on the Barbie.
I thought it was fabulous.
Thank you. I love that book too. But I wrote that in 1999. I mean, Mummy Lit. It probably started Mummy Lit, the whole genre. And now everybody talks about how difficult motherhood is. It's fine.
It needed to be said.
But at the time, nobody was saying it.
No one was saying it.
And I was in England, which was even worse, because at least in Australia, Aussie women are they're just more kind of warm and open and honest about these things. But in England, everyone at the time was trying to be the perfect mother.
Exactly.
And so I remember saying to this group of girlfriends, English girlfriends of mine, like, "Oh my God, this is so hard. I mean, I'm going, is anyone else just crying, sobbing into their pillow at night with the exhaustion?" And one of the English women looked at me and said, "Have you thought about therapy?"
Oh my gosh.
Instead of just saying, "Oh God, here's a gin, drink that,"
Oh my gosh.
So I did think, well, when I wrote Mad Cows, I thought maybe I'm the only one not coping.
No.
But as soon as the book came out, I got so many letters from other women. And
I bet you did.
This is long before Mumsnet and all
did.
that stuff. So women didn't have an outlet. So, and that's when I thought, Kath, always trust your instincts.
Exactly.
Your instincts were right.
But
that was a big bestseller for me, that book.
Well, I'm not surprised. But I'd also bet you got quite a backlash from,
I did.
From women who did not want that to be told.
Yeah, there was a bit of a backlash too. I had to navigate the Mail on Sunday.
You have genuinely mastered the art of not appearing to care what other people think, which I guess helps you to speak out. Is it something you've had to work on? Because I know a lot of people say the one thing about being older is I don't care so much what people think, but you've always managed that. How have you managed that? Because, clearly to have the courage to speak out, you've got to not care that some people are not going to like it.
No. I think the important thing is just to have a great group of girlfriends. If you've got that wonderful support, that female friendship, I mean, you can't beat that camaraderie and that loyalty and that love.
Yeah.
And, and I've got that. I've got wonderful friends in London. I've got wonderful friends in Australia, and I've got my sisters.
Yeah. So
you do need the sisterhood. The sisterhood is powerful.
Right.
And it does keep you buoyant. It shouldn't be called buoyant. It should be called girland. Because it does keep you uplifted. So... yeah, so I suppose it's that, yeah, and also I have to call out the patriarchy and the misogyny. I can't not do that. It's totally in my DNA.
What drives you to do that?
Well, I hate inequality. I mean, and the fact that we feminists have been saying the same thing for so long and nothing's changed is so dispiriting, and it won't change until men join us at the barricades.
Yeah.
So my favourite thing is when a woman will write to me, or she'll come up to me at a book signing and she'll say, "Oh, I was reading one of your books in bed, and my husband was like, I can't believe you're reading a book by that loud-mouthed, hairy-legged feminist, whatever." And then she'll be laughing and he'll go on, read me that bit. And she'll read it and he won't laugh. And he'll go, read me another bit. Okay, read me another bit. And then gradually, after a few days, he disappears into the toilet with the book, which is the ultimate accolade from a man, you know, because a lot of blokes think sitting on the toilet's a leisure activity. And the fact that I can win them over with a bit of humour, and that I can disarm with comic charm in that way, to me is a total victory.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Are guys frightened of you?
Gosh, not the lovely men. There are so many lovely men. I have so many great men in my life, obviously.
Yeah.
And I've got a beautiful boyfriend, and I've got a lovely son, and I've got 2 great ex-husbands. So it's not that I'm man bashing in any way, but I will bash misogynists and sexists, and I will call them out.
Yeah. And actually, I wanted to ask you about your lovely boyfriend, because everybody I know these days is only able to meet people through Tinder or some kind of app. And you waltz into Regent's Park and you meet somebody.
I know,
Now, most people, if they heard a guy sitting under a tree playing the guitar, which I believe is how you first spotted him, would just go, oh, that's nice, and walk on. But how on earth did you have the courage? I mean, talk about courage to speak up. That is courage. How did you manage that one?
Do you think there's courage?
Yes, I do.
I know, it's kind of embarrassing when you're a satirist and you've got chronic skepticemia like me. I am so skeptical of things. To have what they call that in the movies, a meet cute or a cute meet, where you meet someone in that cinematic way.
It is unbelievable. It's the most romantic thing I've heard for a very, very long time.
I know. And he was playing Bach in the park under a tree because it was a hot day. It was too hot in his flat.
Yeah.
And it was the most beautiful playing I'd ever heard. And I had to go and say something to him. And of course and then he's Irish, so of course, my God, that mellifluous voice, and then of course the charm, and then the humour, and the intelligence, and we just got talking, and I just couldn't stop talking to him. So,
but I mean, nobody else was sitting by him, were they? And
no.
So how come you had the courage to do that?
I suppose it's just an Australian thing.
It's amazing.
You know, and also, I always give praise where it's due. I mean, if I see someone wearing a beautiful dress. Or I see a guy on the tube doing something kind, if he stands up for someone, I always say that was a really nice thing you just did. I always do that.
Yeah.
You know, when I see something good, call it out as well. So yeah, my boyfriend is wonderful because he's a beta male, and beta is better. I mean, I've had 2 alpha husbands who are brilliant, both of them amazing.
Yeah.
You know, and the most important part of a man's anatomy is this huge throbbing organ between the ears. And both of my ex-husbands are incredible intellectuals and amazing men. And Brian is also incredibly bright, but he's so kind, and he's gentle, and he's a nurturer.
Oh,
so I don't mean to drive you mad, but he also does all the cooking, all the shopping.
I am so jealous.
Wait, there's worse. There's more.
Oh,
more. You're really going to kill me
now.
He cooks cakes.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I know.
And
he adores
you met
me.
him in the park. And you must have an angel looking after you.
I think I deserve it.
Yeah.
But I would say, the reason women should look for a beta male is that they adore you, they don't bore you, and they do all your chores for you.
Well, yeah, but most people would meet that person if they're very, very lucky through an app. This is what I'm saying. The fact people can't even meet people these days because they're too scared to speak.
Right.
This is what I'm intrigued by.
Well, Brian says too, he says, forget Tinder. There should be an app called Tender.
Yes.
Where you're match made by what poetry you like and what music you listen to.
That's such a good idea.
Isn't it a great idea? And what books so it's an intellectual, emotional match rather than a physical attraction,
a good
which
idea.
Grows through liking the same things and being fired up by the same things. So yeah, Tender, let's do that. That can be our app. Yeah,
definitely. And has there ever been a time when you felt you wanted to say something but couldn't? I can't imagine. But has there? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When my son was diagnosed with autism when he was 3.
Yes.
And my husband at the time, Jeffrey, Julius's father, didn't want me to talk about it in public.
Right.
He said it was a private thing. And so I didn't talk about Jules's autism in public till he was 21. And when he turned 21, I found myself, because, when you're a writer, it is a very cathartic experience. I always knew one day I'd write a book about, a single mum raising a child on the spectrum.
Yes.
But I didn't know when I'd write it, but I started writing a different book with this very personal book started pouring out at the end of my pen called The Boy Who Fell to Earth.
Yes.
So I said to Jules, how would you feel about us coming out about your autism? And he read some of the book and he said, well, Mum, it's a celebration of idiosyncrasies, eccentricities, and being different. And I said, that's exactly what it is, Jules. Thanks.
How wonderful.
So with his permission, I very tentatively started talking about it. I was so nervous.
Oh, my goodness.
Because I didn't want people to think that I was exploiting him in any way.
Yes.
But then, of course, the reaction was so positive, and so many other people started talking about their own children who had needs, or their brother or their father, or because autism, of course, mainly comes through the male line. Women do have autism, of course, but sometimes they're better at masking it as well.
Yeah.
But what I realised is that it's always better to shine a light into a dark corner.
Yes.
How can it not be better to illuminate these things?
Yes.
But I regret not speaking out about that for so long. Because also, it would explain to people why I was so deranged.
Yes, of
Why I
course.
was swinging off a chandelier with a cocktail between my teeth, or running, shrieking into the night, sobbing or whatever. People, it was a missing piece of my puzzle too.
Yes, completely.
And so I do regret that. And I would say to anyone who is raising a child who's different, talk about it, join support groups, find other people going through it. It's the only way to survive, really, is to have that psychological
and
safety net.
Do you think that as somebody with a profile that speaking up is a responsibility almost?
I do.
Because maybe other people can't.
Yeah. I think that's for sure. What is the point of having a profile if you can't use it to make the world a better place? I do have some famous friends who don't use their public platform.
Yeah.
And, and I'm constantly trying to get them to change. But, for some of them, I think they feel that they wouldn't have the longevity they have in their careers if they're worried about being trolled.
Yes.
They're worried about being attacked.
Yeah.
They're worried about being put in, categorized in a certain box.
But do you think social media and cancel culture has impacted people's willingness to speak up? Because it's so magnified now, isn't
yes,
it?
I think totally.
So it's very, I know people who just had to come off it because they just couldn't cope with it. It became scary.
Yeah, no, it is scary, and the people who put those hateful posts up should be held to account.
Yeah,
the fact they can do it anonymously is outrageous.
Yeah.
Because my mother told me the other day. She only told me recently, actually, that when Puberty Blues came out, she was a headmistress at the time, and she said that she got so many anonymous phone calls of people saying, "You call yourself a teacher? How can you be a head teacher when you've got a slut of a daughter like that? What kind of mother are you?" And that kind of stuff.
No.
Now that was the internet trolling of its day.
Yes.
Was the anonymous phone call.
Yes.
Which you couldn't trace.
Yes.
And she didn't tell me because she knew it would have so totally decimated me.
Yeah.
So it's always gone on.
Yeah,
but you mustn't let it cow you, because the other thing I would say is when you speak up, that yes, there'll be people who attack you, but there'll be the equal amount of people who applaud you.
Right.
So you just have to concentrate on the positive side and ignore the negative, in my view.
And
it's worth it.
It hasn't impacted you. It hasn't made you kind of scared to speak up. I mean, look what happened, in terms of the whole to J.K. Rowling on the whole transgender issue.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be like poking the wasp nest.
There are certain subjects that are really inflammatory. Would you steer away from certain things?
I think, when I say it's poking the wasp nest, but you can also, comedy allows you to put that suit on. That, what do you call that suit they wear, the beekeeping suit?
Oh, yes.
It does give you a bit of protection.
That's what I was saying, that you use it as a weapon in a very skilled way.
Yes. And I think women are very good at that. So I would always say try and do it with a bit of humour.
Yes.
And a bit of self-deprecating humour. Because if people think you're sending yourself up as well, they're much more generous in their opinion, I think.
Yes.
So, but it can be like, balancing on a gymnast's beam. Just to mix metaphors. I've got wasps, I've got gymnast beams, it's all going wrong.
And how do you encourage others, particularly women, to find their voice and speak up for themselves? Because there are so many who cannot do anything like the way you do it.
Well, I always think back to the suffragettes and how brave they were. And see, in Australia, women got the right to not just vote, but also to stand for Parliament. before any country in the world. I mean, New Zealand was the first country to give women the vote. No, it was South Australia, New Zealand, and then it was all of Australia. But Australia was the first country to give women the right to stand for Parliament. And those suffragettes were so famous, Viva Goldstein, Muriel Matters, that actually Emily Pankhurst brought them to England like rock stars to talk to British women, saying, to inspire them on how to get to win their rights. You know, and they did it in a funny, cheeky way as well. Like Muriel Matters, who was an actress and then became an activist, she came over here with the suffragettes, and the king there was a proclamation that you couldn't have any public demonstrations on the street or you'd be arrested. So she hired a hot air balloon and printed out these pamphlets saying votes for women, and she flew over the top of the king's speech, dropping down these pamphlets. And then, unfortunately, the wind blew her off course and she ended up in some cow paddock in Kent or something. But it became an international story. This huge story.
I've never heard that
Yeah,
story.
and Australia, what put Australia on the map was not the Anzacs. Everyone thinks it was the brave soldiers in the First World War. It was actually our suffragettes who were, we were seen as kind of like an incredible democratic experiment that allowing women into Parliament. So whenever I'm nervous about speaking up, I think of those my foremothers and how brave and how inventive and how clever they were, and I draw great strength from that.
I was going to ask you, do you ever get nervous?
Do I? Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, especially if I'm saying something a bit contentious. But if it's true, and if I know what I'm saying is true, I know that it will cut through and it will resonate and it will land. Yeah. So far, let's see how we go on the next book.
And have you ever been inspired by somebody else's ability to speak out?
A lot of my friends.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of my Emma Thompson.
Yeah.
I think I love the way she speaks up and speaks out. Bette Midler does it with humour also.
Yes.
You know, so yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of my female friends are the same as me. They're vocal and they're brave and they're funny and they're clever and they're witty and they want the world to be a better place. Like Sandy Toksvig, another one of my really good friends. Ruby Wax, who's talked so openly about her mental health issues.
Yes.
And made it easier for other people to do that.
Exactly.
So, I think only good things can come from using your voice. You know, what's the point of having it?
Yeah, yeah. And can you share any specific experiences where you've really had to summon up the courage to say something?
Yeah, I can think of one thing.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I can think of is when I wrote a novel called Fetal Attraction, which was also probably one of the first books to ever tell the truth about childbirth.
Yeah.
And the horrors.
Yeah.
And also call out a lot of the misogynistic obstetricians at the time, that kind of thing. And it was also a satire on the British literati, glitterati, and clitorati. Because hadn't lived in London that long.
Yeah.
And I'd met so many condescending upper class types. I remember being at a book party once where this book reviewer said he was dropping his own name and mouthing off, and he said something about something was condescending, and he turned to me and said, condescending, it means talking down to.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Oh my God.
And then I was going on a program called Start the Week, which is on the BBC.
Yeah.
And at the time, Melvyn Bragg was the presenter. And that set the agenda, the news agenda for the week almost.
Yes.
And I went on that show, and Melvyn was so rude to me and so angry and dismissive and horrible. And when I got off air, saying, how could I, an Australian, satirise his milieu,
Yeah.
And when I got off air, all the journalists were ringing me saying, why was Melvyn like that? Do you want to say anything? And the English way is never complain, never explain.
Exactly. Yeah.
And my friends were saying, don't react. And I thought, and I was really upset by how he treated me. And I remember I was weaning my baby at the time. The milk was squirting out. Like I was, you know how you're a hormonal wreck.
Yeah, of course. What
he was going through a weird, grumpy time, I don't know. I can't remember why, but anyway. So, and I thought, I won't say anything. And then I thought, what have I got to lose?
Yeah.
I thought, you should always speak up.
Yeah.
And that training I had from those guys, putting the $10 on the table, I thought, no, I'll just comedically kneecap him. So I gave quotes saying clearly his midlife crisis had started without him, and he was probably one of those guys who thought monogamy was something you make dining room tables out of. And I said, if only he didn't have love bites on his mirror, he'd see his reflection more clearly, and I just made jokes. And in the end, he had to he apologised to me in the Sunday Times.
Oh, good.
And also the book went straight up the bestseller list. So
Marvellous.
I thought, what is there? You always speak out and speak up.
Brilliant.
So, and I do hasten to add that Melvin and I are friends now.
Right.
I think he was just going through probably a bad time in his private life. I don't know. But if you can look it up at the time, he'd been savaging a few women, like he was on a roll.
Okay.
But he stopped after that.
But, oh, what a great story.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that until you just asked me.
And
I thought, wait, there was a moment, yeah.
So, have you ever regretted saying anything?
Oh, well, I have foot and mouth disease, chronic. If there's a faux pas in a 10-mile radius, I will make it.
Right.
So, yeah, often I say
Really?
something. Oh, yeah, I do. But luckily, being Antipodean in Britain, people just they kind of pat you on the head and think, oh, poor little colonial girl, she couldn't help it.
So you get away with it.
You can get away with it, yeah.
I've never
so far.
You get away with all of this. That's quite brilliant.
Well, you have to be a bit cheeky.
Yeah. And what advice would you give somebody? Because I know you say you've got lots of friends who speak up, and you've got this wonderful female network, but there are so many women in particular who would never be able to. So people listening, what could you say to help them with the first step to be able to do it?
It is hard for women because, as I said before, we're raised to be decorative and demure. We're raised to be people pleasers.
Yeah.
All the research shows that when a man and woman start talking at the same time in a meeting, the woman always pulls back out of politeness.
Yeah.
Sheryl Sandberg started that whole idea about leaning in.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to practice doing that.
Yes.
Because how many times have you been at a meeting where you've made a really good suggestion, totally ignored? A few minutes later, a man says it, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's brilliant! You're a genius." Well, that's the time you go, "Oh, I'm so glad you picked up on my idea that I just said a minute ago because blah blah blah." And if you're at a dinner party, it happens too. So many times I've been at a dinner party where, the hostess will say something really funny.
Yeah.
And nobody will laugh. And then her husband, it happened just recently, a very well-known British broadcaster,
right, made
a similar joke, and everybody's guffawing. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, your wife just made that. And I remember he then said, oh, yeah, but women can't tell jokes. And I was straight away said, yeah, that's because we marry them.
Oh.
So come straight back.
Marvellous.
Like, pretend you're at a tennis game. Like, just think of it as tennis.
Yeah.
The Wimbledon of wit.
Yes.
Lob back some banter. And if you're thinking it, say it. Don't think... Because there's that wonderful French expression, I can't speak French, but esprit d'escalier.
Yeah, esprit d'escalier.
How do you say it?
Esprit d'escalier.
Esprit d'escalier, the wonderful thought, the wonderful retort.
As you're going down
of.
The stairs, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant French expression.
Yes, it is.
So try to avoid it.
Yes, absolutely.
When you think it, say it.
Yes.
Be quick.
Yes.
And get your, become the Navratilova of the backhanded compliment.
But how do you do that? Because so often I think afterwards I do have that and I go, damn, I wish I'd said that. But you manage to do it in the moment.
Practice.
It's practice. It's having your one-liners there.
Practice. And also I love banter. I mean, to me that's my repartee is my favourite exercise.
Yeah.
So I do seek out witty friends, I must say, and nothing thrills me more than just lobbing a bit of banter back and forth.
Kathy, this has been an absolute thrill for me and an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Well, thank you for speaking up about speaking up.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to The Courage to Speak, presented by me, Leonie Mellinger. The Courage to Speak is produced by Anushka Warden, with sound production by Theo Bosenket and music by Guy Pearson. For more information on The Courage to Speak, visit www.mellinger.co.uk.